Hello and welcome to the Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Aniagolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, with increasing confidence, US Democratic presidential challenger Joe Biden looks to be on the brink of victory over his opponent Donald Trump. But as vote counting continues in a handful of key states, some of Mr. Trump's supporters are protesting on the streets, and his campaign is taking legal action in 4 states, claiming irregularities, even though US constitutional experts say the lawsuits that are being filed are unlikely to change the results. So, how will the next few days and weeks play out in America in these unpredictable times? We'll have reaction and assessment from across the country's political divide. Plus, as the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, vows to continue a military offensive launched in the Tigray region in response to what he says was a deadly attack on a military camp by forces loyal to the regional government, the TPLF, the country's federal government proposes that the TPLF be designated a terrorist organization. As the country lurches towards civil war, we ask, what on earth is going on in Ethiopia? We'll speak to an Ethiopian human rights activist. And later, as the Nigerian Human Rights Commission in Abuja inaugurates its investigative panel into police brutality following weeks of protest and unrest, the tribunal says it's received more than 150 petitions against the police. But can it deliver justice to the dozens of complainants? We'll speak to our correspondent who was there as the investigation got underway in the Nigerian capital. Coming up. First to America, where Joe Biden appears to be edging closer to victory in his battle with Donald Trump over the US presidency. With hundreds of thousands of votes still being counted in key states that are too close to call, Mr. Biden says he's confident he's going to win. Georgia and Arizona, which are crucial to pushing him over the line, are extremely tight. Donald Trump's campaign team have alleged voting irregularities in a number of states. Correspondents say Mr. Trump has reverted to tactics he used when he was a businessman, firing off lawsuits left, right and center, in some cases demanding recounts, and in others that all counting be stopped whilst they investigate absentee ballots. Trump supporters have been converging on polling centers in various cities, forcing some of them to close. And there have been clashes with the police in some states.
Folks, you have to be ahead to win, for a Republican to win here. How many votes do we have to be ahead? 400,000 is not enough? With 80+% counted, I think there's only 14% of the vote to go. Do you think we're stupid? You think we're fools? You know something? The Democrats do think you're stupid, and they do think you're fools, and that's why you get called deplorable and chumps. So, we're going to stick with this. We're going to win this election. We've actually won it. Just a matter of counting the votes fairly.
We're here for a peaceful protest to make known that we don't want the type of America that Trump might want, and we want Biden to win. And we're looking forward to it right now, and we're hoping for it. We are in the streets right now because we want equality for everyone. We want everyone to have the same rights and the same opportunities. And we see that in an America that Biden and Harris are both running together.
Well, for more on the Republican reaction as a Biden victory appears to be inching closer, I'm joined now from Florida by the Republican strategist Erol Morkoc. Good to see you, Erol. What do you make of what's been going on?
Well, I mean, it's a real doozy. Ultimately, we play to the whistle, and right now, neither candidate is at 270 votes or electoral votes. We feel that Nevada and Arizona are both in play. Nevada should update around noon today, and those are going to be some mail-in ballots as well as ballots that were cast by voters who came to the polls and registered there. We're only down by 8,000 votes there. Right now, we also feel confident as we get to Friday that we're going to have turned the tide with the batches of votes coming out in Arizona, which is key. Democrats are unfortunately, again, conflating every vote with every legal vote, and the same way that conflate illegal immigrants with legal immigrants. And once again, we're objecting and we're saying that we want to make sure the vote is counted correctly, but votes that are going to be postmarked, post-dated, this 100,000 ballots showing up. Looks like the Midwest has some really big irregularities. When we saw midway through the election night how far ahead we were in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and then all of a sudden we see this 100,000 vote spike in Detroit and stuff. That's why we've started to file lawsuits, just as the Biden campaign has their exact same level of attorneys out there. This is part and parcel of the modern day campaign. So right now we're very disappointed with Fox News, who called that election in Arizona with 25% of the ballots left to count, over 1 million left to come in, only tens of thousands of votes ahead from Mr. Biden. So going to bed last night, people were a little bit more disheartened. But once the dust settled and people woke up and looked at the reality of the math, we feel very confident that as all the real votes are counted, we're going to actually pull this one out and get Donald Trump a second term.
Beyond the sentiment and the wishes, which are completely understandable, I mean, when you look at the cold, hard light of day, with all the election officials in most states coming out to say that there's been no irregularities, do you think Donald Trump could still hold on? I mean, is there a pathway for him to do that, even though it appears to be extremely narrow right now?
Yeah, well, there's always a pathway. This is America. There's always a way to do it. It just so happens that, while I'd like to stress, we're not insinuating this is some Tammany Hall sort of, dead men voting for John Kennedy, the old style of ballot fraud. When we're talking about what happened where you were allowed to send out mass ballots, not requested absentee ballots, and those ballots have been collected and harvested, who knows who filled them out? Those are the kind of things that we're talking about. Now, could you get 100,000, 200,000 of those in there? No, that's not likely. But could you get 10, 20, 30, 40 of them? Absolutely. And could you do enough to change each county until it was able to swing in your favor? Absolutely. So that's the kind of fraud that we're actually looking out for. We're not worried about the hundreds of thousands. We're worried about 10 or 15,000 votes from corrupt cells that maybe are acting independently in the interest of the Biden administration. We're not accusing the actual Biden administration, or Harris administration, I should say, of actually directly being involved in that. It's individual actors.
I mean, you do agree, do you, Errol, that any possibility of victory for Donald Trump is a pretty long shot right now?
Well, no, I would disagree, only because we haven't counted all the votes, right? And so if the same numbers were being given to me with 99% of votes counted, I would concede, yeah. But right now, when we're only down by 8,000 in Nevada, I mean, keep in mind the race is tightening in Georgia and in Pennsylvania for Mr. Biden. So as these votes come in, races are narrowing on both sides, not just in our favor. So right now, I would not concede that it's a long shot, because there's so many ballots to be counted. If we were at these same numbers, though, and we're at 99%, I'm a realist. Obviously, arithmetic is not something that has alternative facts. But right now, we still think there's a lot of game to play, and we're going to be playing to the whistle.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. Are you able to concede to the Democrats that Joe Biden is winning against Donald Trump, even though it might be a few days before everything becomes 100% clear?
Yeah, I think the Harris administration is definitely in the lead right now. Whether or not they end up taking the White House is a different thing. It's the third quarter where we're rounding the bend. This is where we're going to start to see the separation. Here's where all those mail-in votes. Here's where all those absentee votes. Here's where everything that this foreign pestilence, the COVID-19 pandemic, caused to our country. Here's where all of those numbers are going to come in on the back end, and we're going to see. Hopefully, Donald Trump is able to make up the lost ground, but he's certainly not out. He is certainly down, though, going into that final count, and perhaps a recount in Wisconsin, depending on things.
Well, I mean, I'm rather curious, Errol, to know why you're calling it the Harris administration. What's the idea?
It's a little bit of a joke, just because she called it the Harris administration herself, and we quite simply don't think that Joe Biden's going to be the one running the ship. We think that this is an election for the far left of the Democrat Party, and those are the people who are going to be running it. So, as they called it that themselves, we've been, comically continuing the term. But I meant to say, of course, the Biden administration with Kamala Harris, who we think really will be running the show, because Joe Biden he doesn't have the cognitive ability or the capabilities anymore to really be the commander in chief, at least to the level that Donald Trump was. But Kamala Harris does. She's young, vibrant, strong. So we really think that that's the real candidate here.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you say that even at this late stage, and given the fact that he's not only been in the Senate for 47 odd years, he's been the Vice President of the United States for 8 years and presided over some very crucial and critical policies of the Obama administration. Nevertheless, I mean, what confidence do you actually have that the fate of this election will fall to the courts? Because, I mean, there is no legal precedent, and Mr. Trump's declaration of victory has no legal weight whatsoever. And most U.S. legal constitutional experts say that the lawsuits that are being filed now are unlikely materially to change the results in a way that could alter the election.
I think there's a truth to both sides of it. On one hand, if those lawsuits are filed and everything that they're alleging checks out to be above board, there's been zero instances of fraud, there's been zero malfeasance by Democrat operatives, then yeah, they would not come to fruition. But I mean, this is part of the due diligence that both parties are doing, and historically, everybody from corporations to city councils do whenever they make any decision. They certainly make sure the legal options are covered. So if they were to find anything, that would change things. So what are the Democrats afraid of? Why are they afraid of us peeling back the curtain and seeing what was going on behind the operation? Why were they covering up the windows to the accounting offices? What do they have to hide? If they have nothing to hide, then they're going to come out right. But if they do have something to hide, and we find it, and we find a lot of voting irregularities and spikes that don't make any sense, and post-dated ballots, and all of a sudden if you used a Sharpie in Arizona, maybe your ballot wasn't counted. These are the kind of things that you legally challenge, so therefore they're documented and you can find them. So let's say that the Sharpie thing turns out, well, you need to have a legal challenge to the ballot in general so that can be brought up. So maybe it turns out there was no malfeasance whatsoever, but there was a problem with the ink. Well, because that has been legally brought up, it's now in the court of law, it's documented, it's registered, and that's the importance of either political party when they file lawsuits here. I think it's bigger than just the direct concept of, will this change the outcome? No, the voters are going to change the outcome. And if they come out in a resounding landslide in the final 25% of the votes that have to be counted for Joe Biden, then he will be the president. But if it comes back with Trump all of a sudden back in play, then perhaps it's going to be really good that we have those legal challenges there to protect the American voter from fraud, especially in these uncertain times in this very unusual election that has a lot of new tweaks and gears to be ironed out.
Well, we've got less than a minute. I mean, I suppose people like yourself, I mean, a Republican strategist, should take some comfort from the fact that you delivered Florida. I mean, you're in Florida. That was a crucial state for the president, and you succeeded in doing that. Perhaps you should, congratulate yourselves and all go and have a cup of tea.
Yeah, we might have a cup of tea for sure. We're very proud of what we did in Florida. We overperformed by 3-4%. We're also very proud of what we did in places like Georgia or in Ohio or in Pennsylvania. And that's the one thing to take away here. Donald Trump, even if he loses, Joe Biden didn't get a mandate. We're going to have the Senate, which means none of those left-wing policies are going to get through. In the midterm, we would take the same ground game and retake the House. Essentially, Joe Biden, if he is able to steal this election, will be a lame duck president from day one. And the same kind of vigor and verve we put into Florida and the ground game that we got here, I mean, building movement. And so we're happy to see that it was able to succeed.
Erol, thank you very much indeed. Erol Morkoc is a Republican strategist, and he's talking to me there from Florida. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our analysis of the outcome of Tuesday's U.S. presidential election, which remains finely balanced and focused on a few key states. Stay with us.